What's up, everyone? My name is Kincaid, and welcome to episode 3 of the 2005 Suzuki RM125 flip. Quick recap if you missed the last two videos. I traded a 1994 Yamaha YZ80 for this bike. When I tore this bike apart, I discovered that the piston was installed backwards, so she definitely needed some love. So picking right back up where we left off, I actually got a Rabaconda tire changer, which I was very excited about, and this bike was in desperate need of a front tire, so I figured no better time than to test out the brand new Rabaconda. I opted to run a Shinko 546 series front tire on this bike. It should hook up real nice on the 125. I mean, look at that tread pattern and the size of those knobs. I will also have a full review video on this Rabaconda coming soon, so be on the lookout for that. And if you'd like to check out the product, you can click the link in the description. Overall, I was thoroughly impressed. My first tire change took me only 12 minutes, which is significantly faster than any other tire change I've ever done in my life. So I continued my progress by replacing the throttle cable and throttle tube along with the grips. To install grips, I use Pro Taper grip glue and a little bit of electronic cleaner to help the grip slide into place. I also cut a small hole in the end of the grip to make sure that no air gets stuck under it. I decided to throw a new bar pad on here because the other one was pretty nasty and worn out, and honestly the aesthetic of a bar pad really can make the bike look a lot better. So here are the old and new clutch shafts side by side, and you can see how worn out that old one was. So installing this did exactly what I thought it would do and allowed my clutch to have a normal pull. You can see because of this replacement, the cable no longer bottoms out. With that clutch issue all squared away, I was finally able to reinstall the stator and flywheel, so I got the timing mark aligned in the engine case and tightened that down, and then installed the flywheel and torqued it to the appropriate spec. Perfect. I reinstalled the ignition cover with a fresh gasket from Pro X, and then I decided to start graphic install. I started with the swing arm with some fresh graphics from DeCal Works. At this point, all of the cables were set up and routed on the front end, so I decided to install the front fender and number plate with the Polysport Restyle kit. One of the threads in the triple clamp was damaged, so I did have to tap that out, but then from there it bolted up no problem.
These graphics would look sick if they were inversed. Ooh-wee, DeCal Works crushed that as always. Still waiting on the piston, but might just have to slap the rear end on temporarily to get that done.
I used fast metric fasteners for the body of this bike as well, and went ahead and replaced those old nasty looking fork guard bolts. Plastic installation went nice and smoothly, and of course it hasn't been too long since I installed a Restyle kit on an RM125, so I was no stranger to the process. As much as I love that black RM125, man, does Suzuki Yellow look good, and these graphics look phenomenal. Again, DeCal Works just did an awesome job, always so happy with the work they do. At this point, I figured it was time to slap an air filter in that freshly cleaned air box, so I oiled it up, greased the rim of the air box there, and then installed the filter. This bike may have sucked some dirt through in the past, but I'm going to make sure that it does not happen again in the future. I cleaned up the rims and spokes with some super clean all-wheel cleaner, which is actually really effective and shines up those silver rims nicely. By now, I was still waiting for a piston, but really wanted to see what the rest of the bike looked like altogether and figured I might as well go ahead and continue with graphic install so that I didn't have to do it once the piston and top end was all ready to go. I installed graphics using the DeCal Works application kit. It allows you to wet apply the graphics so that if you mess up a little bit, you can kind of slide them into the appropriate place, and then you just use their squeegee to get the air bubbles out. It's really a nice, simple process that I think makes graphic install not only a little bit easier, but makes the final outcome a little better. I cleaned up the silencer and gave it a nice polish with some Mother's aluminum polish, and then reinstalled it on the bike. I finally got my new piston in the mail, which was very exciting. I'd really been looking forward to getting this engine back together and the bike running. Piston installation went very smoothly. Of course, I measured the ring end gap and the piston clearance in the cylinder before installing this. I lathered up the piston and cylinder with 2-stroke oil and then slid the cylinder on without issue. For seals and gaskets throughout the entire top end, I used a Pro X seal and gasket kit. I torqued down the 2 cylinder nuts that I could get to with my torque wrench, and then I did the other 2 by hand using my best judgment. I got the power valve all reassembled, which is pretty simple on the 05, installed some new head O-rings, and then installed the cylinder head. I torqued the cylinder head nuts in a crisscross pattern, leaving only a few things left to do before firing this bike up for the first time. I reinstalled the radiators, which are actually in great shape, and that is super nice for mounting up the radiator shrouds without having to flex them or struggle. And then from there, I decided it was time to stop slacking and finally get around to rebuilding the carburetor. The carb had a leak at the bottom of the float bowl before, and I wanted to make sure to resolve that when doing the rebuild. So, of course, I used a Pro X carburetor rebuild kit. I got some weird putty that was on the bottom of the float bowl off. I was wondering if maybe it was there for a leak or an issue, but once I got it off, I found there was no leak or problem. I just replaced that O-ring inside there, and the carb no longer had a leak to it. I did test this before reinstalling the carb on the bike by hooking the carb up to the fuel line and turning the fuel on. I installed the carb, and the intake manifold is pretty hard, maybe just due to the age of the bike, so I had a really hard time actually getting the carb pushed into that, but once it was installed, the boot went on pretty easy, and the rest of the bike assembled very quickly from there. I struggled a little bit at first to get the header aligned and ended up pulling the silencer back off to put the header on, and then it all went together pretty smoothly. I topped the bike off with the appropriate fluids. Actually, for coolant, I just used the AutoZone 50/50 mix. It is silicate and phosphate free, so it is safe to run in dirt bikes. And then I just run some 10W40 engine oil in the transmission for this bike. I drained the old fuel because I don't exactly trust the previous owner after seeing the piston was installed backwards, and then replaced it with my own 30-to-1 mix. I don't actually know for sure if the 05 calls for 30-to-1, it could be 32-to-1. My 2003 calls for 30-to-1, and I don't actually have a manual for the 05. That said, with a fresh top end, I am fine with erring on the side of too rich. But I installed that seat with the fresh DeCal Works seat cover, and Fastmetric also sent over some bolts for the fork stubs and triple clamps, so I replaced those bolts. Honestly, those nice new shiny bolts make the bike look so much nicer. It's all those little details that really go a long way. At this point, the only thing left to do was hook up the fuel line and see how the girl runs. Alright guys, so the bike is up and running. I heat cycled it 3 times, took it up and down the block, was real gentle with it, and then I did hit the power band once just to see what it feels like. This bike's running crisp. I'm really happy with how it looks. That is a gorgeous bike. Seeing these two together is honestly just incredible. So I'm going to take these two bikes out together to do a photo shoot with the two of them just because I think it'll be awesome. And then I have a really cool edit planned with both of these bikes and my friend Levi's RM125. We're gonna shoot to film that tomorrow. And then, of course, it will be time to put this bike on the market and see where we come out in terms of profit. I'm also going to be listing the 2003 for sale in the near future. So if you're interested in owning either one of these bikes, be on the lookout for information about that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with another video.